My parents gave my house to my brother. They never expected what I did next. The day my parents told me they had given my house to my brother, I thought they were joking. I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, when my father calmly said, "Ryan and his wife will be moving in next month." I laughed because I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. Then my mother looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Honey, you have to understand. Your brother needs it more than you do." I looked around the kitchen I had renovated with my own money, at the hardwood floors I had installed with my own hands, and at the framed photograph of me standing in front of the house on the day I bought it. Then I looked at my parents and asked the only question that mattered. "How exactly did you give someone a house that belongs to me?" My father didn't answer. My mother started crying, and my brother, who had been waiting outside, walked through the front door like he already owned the place. He had no idea what I had discovered 2 days earlier, and my parents had absolutely no idea what I was about to do. My name is Daniel Carter, and for most of my life I was the responsible son. My younger brother, Ryan, was the one everyone worried about. Ryan was charming, funny, and incredibly good at convincing people that his problems weren't really his fault. If he lost a job, someone had treated him unfairly. If he maxed out a credit card, he had been under too much pressure. If he made a bad investment, he had simply been unlucky. My parents always found a reason to rescue him. I, on the other hand, learned early that nobody was coming to rescue me. If I wanted something, I had to work for it. That lesson became especially clear when I was 24. I had just started a new job at a construction management company, and I was living in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates. I was saving every dollar because I wanted to buy a home. My parents laughed when I told them. My father said I should wait until I had a better salary. My mother told me that owning a home was too much responsibility for someone my age, but I kept saving. Then I found the house. It wasn't beautiful when I bought it. The previous owners had neglected it for years. The kitchen cabinets were falling apart, the bathroom needed to be completely redone, and the backyard looked like a jungle. But the location was perfect, and I could see what it could become. I used almost every dollar I had saved for the down payment and took on a mortgage that scared me more than I wanted to admit. Then I spent the next several years turning that old house into my home. I worked on it every weekend. I painted the walls, replaced broken windows, rebuilt the deck, installed new flooring, and renovated the kitchen. Sometimes I came home from work exhausted and still spent 3 hours fixing something. I didn't have expensive vacations. I didn't drive a luxury car. I didn't buy designer clothes. But I had something that mattered more to me. I had a home that was completely mine. My parents were proud of me at first. They told their friends that I had bought property at a young age. But that pride disappeared whenever Ryan needed something. Ryan was 3 years younger than me, and by the time he turned 30, he had already gone through 4 different jobs, 2 failed businesses, and 1 expensive divorce. My parents had paid his rent more than once. They had helped him replace his car. They had even paid off one of his credit cards after he promised he would become more responsible. He never did. Then Ryan met Melissa. Everything changed. Melissa was pregnant within a year, and suddenly my parents had a new reason to protect Ryan. They started talking about how he needed stability because he was going to be a father. They said a child needed a proper home. They said Ryan had to start thinking about his future. I was happy for him, I really was. But then one Sunday afternoon, my mother called me and asked me to come over for dinner. When I arrived, I immediately knew something was wrong. My father was sitting at the dining table with his arms crossed. My mother kept looking at her hands. Ryan was there too, sitting beside Melissa. I sat down. My father cleared his throat. "We've made a decision about the house." I thought he meant their house. "What house?" He looked at me. "Yours." I laughed. "Okay." Nobody laughed with me. My mother finally spoke. "Ryan and Melissa need somewhere to raise the baby." I looked at Ryan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Then my father said, "We're giving them your house." I stared at him. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Finally, I said, "You can't give them my house." My father frowned. "Don't make this difficult." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded him that I had bought the house, that I had paid the mortgage, and that my name was on every document associated with the property. My mother started crying. "Daniel, please, you're single. You don't need a house that big." I looked at her. "It's not about whether I need it. It's mine." Ryan finally spoke. "Come on, Daniel. You can buy another place." I turned toward him. "With what money?" He shrugged. "You have a good job." I laughed. "Ryan, I have a mortgage." He rolled his eyes. My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Your brother has a child coming. You need to think about family." I stared at him. "I am thinking about family. That's why I can't believe my own family is trying to steal my house." My father stood up. "We're not stealing anything." "Then what are you doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he told me that my mother and I would discuss the details later. I walked out. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about what my parents had said. They weren't asking me. They weren't offering. They had already decided. The next morning, I called my mortgage company. Everything was normal. My payments were current. There were no issues with the loan. Then I called the county property office. That's when I heard something that made my blood run cold. The clerk told me there had been a request to transfer ownership of the property. I asked who had submitted it. She told me the name. My father. I immediately asked whether the transfer had been approved. She said it was pending. I hung up and called a real estate attorney named Laura Bennett. I sent her every document I had. The original purchase agreement, the mortgage, property tax records, insurance documents, every renovation receipt I had saved. Laura called me back that afternoon. Her first question was simple. "Daniel, did you ever give your father legal authority to transfer this property?" "No." "Did you ever sign a deed giving the property to your brother?" "Absolutely not." She paused. "Then don't talk to your parents about this anymore." I asked why. She said, "Because something isn't right." The next morning, I met her in her office. She showed me a document. It was a deed transferring my property to Ryan. My name appeared on it. But something immediately looked wrong. The signature wasn't mine. It was close. Very close. But it wasn't mine. Laura looked at me. "Do you recognize the notary?" I did. It was a notary my father had used for his business. My stomach dropped. Laura explained that the document appeared to have been created using information from an old power of attorney agreement. I remembered that agreement. Years earlier, when I had been buying the house, my father had helped me handle some paperwork because I was working long hours. I had given him limited authority to handle one specific transaction. But that authority had expired years ago. Laura looked at me. "This is serious." I asked her what we should do. She told me not to confront anyone. Then she said something that completely changed my approach. "Let them think they've won." I stared at her. She continued, "If your parents believe the transfer is going through, they may reveal more than they intended to." I understood immediately. So I went home, and I pretended nothing had happened. 2 days later, my mother called. She asked if I had reconsidered. I told her I had. She sounded relieved. Then I said, "Maybe Ryan can have the house." There was silence. Then she started crying. "Thank you, Daniel." I felt sick hearing her say it. But I stayed calm. I told her I would move out within a few weeks. She promised me that Ryan would take care of the house. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You're doing the right thing." I almost laughed. The right thing. I had spent years doing the right thing. And apparently, doing the right thing meant losing everything whenever Ryan wanted it. I moved into a small apartment. Ryan moved into my house. He posted pictures on social media. His first photograph showed him standing on the front porch with Melissa. The caption said, "Finally, our new home." My mother commented with 3 heart emojis. My father wrote, "Proud of you, son." I stared at the post for a long time. Then I noticed something. Ryan had taken down the photograph of me and my grandfather that had been hanging in the hallway. He had replaced it with a picture of himself. That was when I realized something important. He didn't think he was borrowing my home. He genuinely believed it belonged to him. 2 days later, Laura called me. "Daniel, we found something." I sat down. She explained that the property transfer wasn't the only document connected to my house. My father had also submitted paperwork suggesting the property could be used as collateral for a business loan. I asked what business loan. Laura sent me the documents. It was for Ryan's new company, a business that had been losing money for months. My parents weren't simply giving Ryan my house. They were planning to use my house to secure financing for his failing business. If the business collapsed, my property could have been at risk. I felt something inside me change. Until that moment, I had been hurt. Now I was angry. Not because they wanted to help Ryan, but because they were willing to risk everything I had built to protect him from the consequences of his own decisions. Laura immediately filed a legal challenge. The transfer was frozen. The bank was notified. And Ryan received a letter informing him that his claimed ownership of the property was disputed. That's when the phone calls started. Ryan called first. "Daniel, what did you do?" I calmly replied, "Talk to your lawyer." He started yelling. "You said I could have the house." I said, "I never said that." He shouted that Mom and Dad had given it to him. I replied, "Then talk to them." He hung up. 5 minutes later, my father called. He didn't ask what happened. He started screaming. He accused me of trying to destroy my brother's future. I listened quietly. Then I asked him one question. "Dad, did you sign the deed?" Silence. I asked again. "Did you sign my name?" He hung up. I looked at Laura. She nodded. That was enough. The investigation moved quickly. The signature was examined. The power of attorney document was reviewed. The notary was questioned. And eventually, the truth came out. My father had used an expired authorization document to initiate the transfer. Ryan knew the house wasn't legally his. My mother knew too. They had convinced themselves that because I was their son, I would eventually forgive them. They had mistaken my patience for weakness. But there was something else. The bank had already been preparing to approve Ryan's loan based on the property. If we hadn't stopped the transfer, I could have been trapped in a financial nightmare created entirely by my family. When my father finally came to my apartment, he didn't look angry. He looked defeated. He sat across from me and said, "We were trying to help Ryan." I stared at him. "You were trying to help Ryan with my house." He nodded. I asked why. He said, "Because he has a family." I looked at him. "And I don't." He didn't answer. I continued. "Do you know how many times I helped Ryan? How many times I covered for him? How many times I listened to you tell me to be patient because he was struggling?" My father looked down. I said, "You didn't give him my house because he needed it. You gave it to him because you knew I wouldn't make a scene." He looked at me. "That isn't fair." I laughed. Neither was any of this. For the first time, my father didn't have a response. Then he said, "What do you want?" I thought about it. 6 months earlier, I would have said I wanted my family to apologize. Now I wanted something different. I wanted them to understand that I was finished being responsible for everyone else's mistakes. So I told him, "I want the truth, no excuses, no blaming Ryan, no blaming Mom. No blaming circumstances, just the truth. He sat there for a long time. Then he admitted it. They had always trusted me more. And because they trusted me more, they had always expected me to sacrifice more. They believed Ryan needed help. They believed I would survive without it. They had confused being strong with not needing anyone. That confession hurt more than the house ever had. Because suddenly, my entire childhood made sense. Ryan wasn't more loved because he was better. He was simply the child my parents were afraid would fail. And I was the child they believed could survive anything. I looked at my father. I'm tired of surviving. He started crying. I know. No, I said, you don't. Then I told him what I had decided. I wasn't keeping the house. He looked shocked. What? I'm selling it. He stared at me. But that's your home. I shook my head. It was. I didn't want to live in a house that had become a battlefield. So I put it on the market. The house sold within 3 weeks. And because I had owned it for years and had renovated most of it myself, I walked away with a substantial amount of money after paying off the mortgage and expenses. But I didn't use the money to buy another big house. I bought a small home in a different city. Then I did something completely unexpected. I started a business. For years, I had worked in construction management. I understood contractors, suppliers, budgets, and project scheduling. I used my experience and part of the money from the house to start a small project management company. At first, it was just me. Then I hired 2 people. Then 5. Then 12. Within 4 years, the company had contracts across the state. I became financially independent in a way I had never imagined. And the strangest part was that I didn't feel rich. I felt free. I didn't need my parents to approve of my decisions. I didn't need Ryan to respect me. I didn't need anyone to tell me that I deserved what I had. Then, almost 5 years after the house incident, my mother called me. I hadn't spoken to her in months. She said, "Your father is sick." My heart dropped. Whatever had happened between us, he was still my father. I asked where he was. She told me. I drove there. When I entered the room, my father looked much older than I remembered. He smiled weakly. "I didn't think you'd come." I sat beside him. "Of course I came." He looked at me. I was a terrible father. I didn't know what to say. He continued. "I spent my whole life thinking I was protecting Ryan." I remained silent. Then I realized I wasn't protecting him. I was making him dependent on everyone around him. I looked at him. He said, "And I did something worse." "What?" "I taught you that being responsible meant you had to accept being treated unfairly." I looked away. Because that was the first time anyone had ever said it out loud. My father reached for my hand. "I'm sorry." I didn't forgive him immediately. I didn't say everything was okay. Because it wasn't. But I squeezed his hand. And I said, "I'm trying." He nodded. That was enough. Ryan eventually lost the business my parents had tried to protect. But he also started working for himself without their help. He wasn't suddenly successful. He struggled. He made mistakes. But for the first time, he had to face the consequences of his own choices. And surprisingly, it changed him. A few years later, he called me. He said, "I owe you an apology." I almost didn't know what to say. He told me he had been selfish. He admitted that he knew the house wasn't really his, but he had convinced himself that our parents had the right to give it to him. Then he said something I never expected. "I was jealous of you." I laughed softly. "Why?" "Because you didn't need them." That sentence stayed with me. Because he was right. I had spent years believing Ryan had everything I didn't. The attention, the support, the financial help. But he had also inherited something I didn't want. Dependence. My parents had protected him so much that they had never allowed him to discover who he could become without them. I had been forced to discover that much earlier. Years later, I sometimes think about that old house. I remember the kitchen, the backyard, the deck I built, the first night I slept there, and the day my parents told me they had given it to my brother. At the time, I thought they were taking my home away. But they were actually giving me the final push. I needed to stop confusing family obligation with unconditional surrender. I didn't destroy my parents. I didn't destroy Ryan. I didn't need to. I simply took back control of my own life. My parents thought I was the son who would always give in. They thought I would sacrifice my house because Ryan had a family. They thought I'd eventually forgive everything because we shared the same last name. They were wrong. The house was never the most valuable thing they took from me. The most valuable thing they took was my belief that family would always protect you. And the greatest thing I gained was realizing that I could protect myself. So when people ask me what I did after my parents gave my house to my brother, they expect some dramatic revenge story. They expect me to say that I ruined Ryan, that I exposed my parents, that I made everyone suffer. But I didn't. I sold the house. I built a new life. I started a business. I learned to forgive without forgetting. And I stopped allowing anyone to make me feel guilty for protecting what I had worked for. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's walking away from the fight they wanted you to have and building a life they can no longer control. My parents gave my house to my brother. They thought they were taking something from me. They never expected what I did next. I let it go. And somehow, by letting that house go, I finally got my life back.